You are listening to the 90 Days Later podcast with Anna Charles, episode 115. Welcome to the 90 Days Later podcast, where I show you how life with less alcohol is more fun than you think. I work with high achievers who struggle to drink a glass of wine without it turning into 2 bottles. I'm the one they call when they want to take it or leave it. So if you want to change your relationship with alcohol that doesn't involve counting days sober, you're in the right place. Hi everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. Before I get into the topic of today, I wanted to draw your attention to, I did a workshop on Saturday, just gone, on romance without the rosé. Yes, a way to redefine Valentine's Day. In fact, the conversation went beyond Valentine's and covered any kind of romantic interlude, let's say, date nights, anniversaries, that kind of thing. So there is a recording of it that you can find on my Substack, actually, annacharles.substack.com, and I will put a note in the show notes. I'll put the link in the show notes so you can get to that. Okay, today we are going to talk about shame. Yes, everybody's favorite topic. Now, usually when I prepare my podcasts, I obviously think out the topic, I plan and structure what I want to say, and I have done that today, but I will tell you the structure is looser because I want to give myself permission to really talk with you about this, because it's not something that we like talking about. It's not something that really many people would run towards, but it's so crucial. It's so crucial just acknowledging the shame that we feel, because then that enables us to take action to do something about it. So this is going to be a bit more of a personal podcast. I'm going to talk to you about what happened for me and what I see happen. And today, this is about really peeling back what's happening beneath the surface when it comes to shame and judgment. I want to start by asking you some questions. So you might want to jot these down and answer them. You can answer them in your head. You can answer them in writing. You don't have to tell anybody, these answers. This is between you and you. If you do want to share what you come up with me, totally fine. As I tell everybody I get on the phone with when they want to consider and really start the process of changing how they drink and they want to work with me, I'm a totally safe space. I talk about this stuff, I talk about alcohol openly and without any shred of judgment. So you are in safe hands with me. Okay, so here are the questions that I think are helpful for you to look at. How do you feel about yourself when it comes to drinking? I mean, genuinely, how do you feel? And if you come up with something that says, well, not great, get specific, right? Get into the one word emotion you would give for this. How would you feel if somebody that you know, could be your husband, wife, boss, neighbor, person who works in the shop, who you go chatty with, how would you feel if they knew that you listen to this podcast? How would you feel if somebody out there knew, in your real life, knew that you really struggle with this to the extent that you are seeking help? Okay? I want you to think about those things. These are the answers that you come up with there are some of the reason why we actually don't move forward, right? Because we just want to shrink away from what we are seeing, what we're telling ourselves. And no wonder there are so many anonymous posters in Facebook groups. And let me tell you this, I have no problem with people wanting to be anonymous. I get it, right? But I think the fact that we have such a desire for anonymity really speaks to how much more difficult this struggle can be. So we have the two things. We have the how we drink and how difficult we find it to change that. That's one thing. And then there's what we make that mean. And then there's what we think everybody else is making that mean, or what society makes that mean, right? These are all different, it's kind of different layers of not very niceness when we're talking about this. I know the reaction that many, many people get. I got this myself, was if you were to open up in real life about having even a vague problem with this. If you can't hold your booze, you have a problem. And if you have a problem, you got to go to AA or recovery. All right, that's what we hear. I'm going to tell you, when I changed my relationship with alcohol, and I've told you this story many times on the podcast, and it was such a miracle. I mean, even to this day, all right, when I'm sitting here talking the 115 episodes in, it still feels like probably, if not the biggest achievement, but certainly the thing that has changed my life the most in terms of me and how I see myself and what I'm capable of. But when I started my business, in fact, even now and then with new people I might meet in real life, they kind of ask me in a hushed voice, so why do you do this? Did you have a problem? Or even if they don't ask, did I have a problem? That's the sort of the hidden question. They say, so why did you choose this niche? That's very interesting. And they want the dirt. They want the gossip, right? We love to gossip as humans. And whenever they do this, I always sort of imagine them, they must think I've been away in the bathroom sort of necking the mouthwash. It's like, I talk about Chablis, but it's really, the Listerine spearmint that was my go-to drink. No, it wasn't. But right, so this is all part and parcel of when we talk about this stuff, that we have this other reaction, that this is sort of, it's almost a Victorian thing. It's like it's out there, everybody knows it's out there, but we're not going to talk about it. It is not the thing to do. It's not the done thing to talk about it. But I vehemently disagree with that. And that's part of why I do this, why I do the podcast, why I put my name and my face to this, to say there is no shame. I want you to leave this podcast, this episode, understanding where you are with shame, and to incite you to be able to carry on and basically shrug off the cloak of shame if you have it on you. Because here's what happened for me. When I believed, right, back in the day, when I believed that the reason I kept over drinking was that there was something wrong with me, right? I would look around and nobody else would have this. Or even if people drank as much as me. I have one friend in particular who always used to drink, and actually still does drink a lot. I would say, she thought she needed to slow down, but that was about it. And it was kind of like, was it just words? When I genuinely meant it. I mean, this clearly was not serving me. So I thought there was something wrong with me, and I really, probably the most stuck I felt was I was just never going to figure this out, right? As I've told you many times, I was a VP at a high-tech company, used to setting goals, used to achieving goals, used to setting goals, used to achieving goals. And this was kind of like the perennial item on the news resolution. And I, even when I say, right, I'm going to do it now, I was like, yeah. And so you say, you're going to fail, you're going to be back to square one, right? So I just genuinely thought that I would not be able to do this. So I had so much shame in myself. That was the feeling I was creating for myself. But here's the ringer, right? Here's really the nub. It gets to the nub of the issue. When I felt shame about over drinking, guess what I did? I drank, right? Thinking and feeling bad about what I was doing created the circumstance where I would just perpetuate this, right? I wanted to stop feeling so bad and upset with myself, and how I would do that, I would numb out and I would drink, right? So the thing that was sort of creating the problem was the thing I thought temporarily solving the problem, and that just carried on and on and on. Now, it's going to be different for everyone. But I will tell you, back in the day, back in those early days, I didn't reach out to anyone for help. I kind of did in if you squinted, sort of I would suggest that things weren't all right. But there's then the responses I got, which were either, if you have a problem, go to AA, as I just said, or no, don't make such a fuss. Of course you don't. You drink less than me, Anna. Got those responses. that kept me thinking, all right, so that's not going to work. In those days, I wasn't curious at all about what happened last night. In fact, what I wanted to do, I wanted to crawl under the covers and forget that last night had ever happened. You nodding along to that? Does that resonate, right? It's totally normal. I really had this sense of just wanting to look away. I don't even want to think about what happened. I just can't. I mean, the embarrassment, right? What did I say? How did I act? Can I remember what I said? Did I really do that, right? We just want to move on and forget it. And I would go into this spiral of really being so cross with myself because I'd say, right, it's just going to be one more time. I'm just going to have one drink. And then it wasn't that way. And I think, you're such a failure. I mean, why can't you do this, Anna? It's like I was on repeat. And the more I couldn't do it, the more I couldn't do it. So again, that's when I would turn to the wine. I'd go straight to the habit to feel better when that was actually the thing that I was desperately wanting to change. It led to more drinking, more hiding, and more being really very unhappy, right? Because the thought of pulling back the curtain to see all that stuff that's hidden there, no, thank you very much. My brain did not want to go there. And this was in the days before I really understood about brain science and really how the brain worked. It was just like, nope, that's a firm no, we're not going to look back there. So that's where I wanted to start. And what I want to really impart to you today is that one of the most common ways that people show up when they put their hand up about struggling with drinking is how alone they feel. Even if they're surrounded in a loving family environment, they feel very alone. If that is you, I want you to know that many, many more people than you would ever realize struggle with resisting temptation and handling the cravings when it comes to drink. But then you see what happens is we're not aware of that. We just look around and we see our husband or our partner or our siblings or our friends and they're just fine, right? We all have these stories. Or my friend Sally, she can just have the wine. She won't even finish the one glass of wine, Anna. I mean, it's kind of like it's not there and I would be, all over it. Is she going to finish that, right? And so we think these guys aren't struggling, these people around me, and that's frustrating. And then that can make you feel even more alone because you really get into the cycle of, well, what does that say about me? And if you haven't opened up to them, that's going to make it less likely that you'll open up because you see how far away you are from them. And if they don't have this problem, then there must be a problem with you. I mean, that's where we often go. I hear this time and time again. Our brain spins on all these questions. And we start to wonder, if I'm struggling to drink less, does that mean I'm an alcoholic? No, it does not. Right? That's a real judgy thing. You can totally be stuck in unhealthy patterns with your drinking without your body relying on alcohol to function. Unfortunately, we live in a society that has a very black and white approach to drinking and lumps people into two groups, right? The normal drinkers with the loads of willpower, or you're an alcoholic. There's no in between, but I'm telling you now, there is a lot of in between. But when you're in this place of not identifying with either of these two extremes, it's very easy to stay silently stuck, trying to figure this out on your own, not talking to anyone about it, because you think, well, perhaps I'm the only one, or even if I'm not the only one, there's just a handful of me, right? This is my problem. This is a problem with me. Now, people tell me that they also feel alone because they don't want to be part of the sober movement either. This is something that is not often spoken about, right? I don't mean here necessarily AA. And by the way, there are many people for whom AA and, the whole sober badge thing works. That is fine. I am not saying that one shouldn't do that, but I'm saying if you don't really sort of relate to that, if you're not all about the, yay, I'm 144, I'm 522 days sober, that whole thing, rah, rah, rah. If you're not that person, you don't want to have that label, right? You don't want that to be part of your identity. I mean, I never did, right? People tell me all the time, but Anna, you're basically teetotal, right? And when I ask for sparkling water in a wine glass, I frequently hear, you're just pretending to drink. You really want it, don't you? And it's like, no, I don't. But again, I just don't want to submit to fitting in with being pigeonholed with how this is seen in society. I just would rather not drink. I'm choosing to not drink. I really don't need to put my hand up and have this be the core thing about me. It isn't. There's far more to me than that, and there's far more to you than that. So if you don't subscribe to that whole kind of sober movement, you're in the right place here, right? We don't do that here. And with a view to really and truly making you feel not alone, if you are sitting listening to this and really struggling, or even if you are making changes but you're not where you want to be yet, and you have this drive, this need, this sense for community connection, accountability, I'm going to really open up today. Now, you've heard me talk on the podcast. You may have seen my videos. You maybe have read my words if you're on my email list, and how I talk about this is just, a simple thing to do, which it is, and it's so worth it, which it is. But I was my first client, right? I was not always this version of Anna. You are seeing me at the end of the transformation. I used to struggle with this stuff daily. And as I say this, I want you to notice what you're thinking. Maybe you've gone to, well, she probably didn't struggle as much as I do. She probably doesn't have alcoholism in her family. It was probably easier for her. All that stuff. Or maybe you think, that's a real relief to hear. If she can do it, then so can I. All right, so there we go. So what I'm going to do now, and I have never done this before, I have never spoken these words to anyone else before, and I'm going to do it on the podcast, go figure, is I'm going to read you a diary entry from January 2017. Now, I want to give some context here. This was really the beginning of the time when I decided I was going to figure this out. I'd had it with the drinking. But looking back, so that was my goal at this time, right? I was really determined. This is really it. All right, Anna, we're really doing it. But important note, despite that feeling of commitment and dedication, and you will hear that in the words I'm about to read, 4 months later, I kind of gave up. I remember something bad happened. I had this negative thing I was dealing with, and I was right back to the drinking. Right? It started with one gin and tonic. Interestingly, it was a gin and tonic. It wasn't the wine. And there was a couple of gin and tonics, and then I was back on the Chablis again. Right? So I hadn't actually, nothing had really changed because I was willpowering my way through. So that was in May. So that's 4 months. I was willpowering my way through those months, and then I again went back to basics and taught myself a new approach, which is the approach that worked and which is the one that I now use with my clients. But I will say that one of the major differences, despite the failure, so one of the major differences from January 2017 when I started doing this was I decided above all else I wasn't going to judge myself. I wasn't going to sit there and just make myself feel worse for what I was doing. And that's something you can do today. You might still be doing all the drinking. You might still not know all the how. And by the way, the how is simple. I teach that. I can teach you that. But if you leave this episode with one thing, is you can decide that you're not going to shame yourself anymore. Okay, so here is what I wrote in my diary. So this was the next day looking back at the previous day. I lay in bed at 1 o'clock in the morning, sweating and unable to sleep. The sweating is more a menopausal symptom, but doubtless wasn't helped by the alcohol. I turned on the light and stayed up for an hour reading articles on giving up the booze. My head was pounding and I took 2 headache tablets. I read about a middle-aged woman who had not been an alcoholic, but had drunk too much wine too regularly. She said the first 3 to 4 weeks were hard, but after that, there was no looking back. She said she felt better. Her skin and hair became healthier. The usual stuff you read. But the comment that caught my notice was when she said she was 1,000,000 times more productive. That was me once upon a time. I want the old me back. I have had enough. Here we go. Woof! So, like I say, it didn't end there. But that was really the point when I said, I'm just going to back myself. And it was a very lonely time. And it really wasn't until I came out the other side that I saw that this being aloneness was part of what had kept me stuck. Because just hinting at this being a problem, I was feeling judged and I was judging myself. I was so ashamed. It was as though if I didn't have to say it was a problem, then it kind of wasn't there, even though it was. Accepting I felt this way and talking openly about it, even to myself to start with, was one of the key ways I moved forward. So I want to ask you, who in your life is answering questions for you when you feel stuck with your drinking? When you silently wonder, God, why is it so hard for me to resist? Or when you wake up like I did, and you're like, why don't I drink that much? I'm going to have a rubbish night's sleep again. I mean, I knew I was going to do this to myself. Am I ever going to figure this out? Or why can't I learn my lesson, right? All those that we go through. Do you have a trusted, knowledgeable person to help you navigate what's really a very tricky questions? Or are you talking to yourself in a rather bullying way that isn't helpful and certainly isn't actionable? Maybe a small percentage of the time you might be talking to a trusted best friend or maybe a spouse, and they probably mean well, but they're likely to feel out of their depth. They might, in fact, be a little bit freaked out, right? They might be thinking, if you have a problem with drinking, what does that mean about, they might worry what that means about their drinking. Or they can then get caught up in other drama, which is in having outdated thinking about this whole idea of there being normal drinkers and alcoholics. And they might be thinking, my gosh, maybe I'm married, maybe she is an alcoholic. Maybe I just need to scoop her up and do an intervention here. Whatever it is, they don't understand the torment. They can't empathize with the torment because they don't experience the torment. And this is why they might say things like, well, I'm going to help you. And it's easy to just say no to a drink. And then they'll do things like, in a couple of weeks' time, as you're pouring the wine, they'll say, is that what you really want? Is that going to help? Right? And then we get into all these resistance and fighting against ourselves and saying, I'm going to have the drink if I want it, even when you don't, right? It doesn't really work. But here's the deal. I know that many of you, maybe most of you, are not talking to friends or loved ones or doctors, and you're relying on your own judgment. And I promise that is not helpful when you make a mistake or when you feel stuck. So the next time when you have a question and feel stuck, I want you to ask, who am I going to go to get answers to these questions? Why does this matter? Because the quality of the answers you get determines what happens next. And it is always the next thing that you do that is the most important. What is the next best decision you can make? Because we're moving forward towards our goal. And this is where I come in. This is why I do what I do, right? I treat you as a normal person. I treat you as a rational adult working on a behavioral problem, rather some lost or hopeless addict who has to claim that they are powerless in the face of the alcohol. I create for you a safe space. I do not require you to analyze your past or your childhood. We don't look for all the reasons why you are the way you are. Well, we can talk about it, but we don't kind of dig into that. No, the focus is 100% on you. I show you what's going on in your own brain. I help you see where you're stuck, even if you can't see it yourself. You get your chance to tell and explore your story in a safe place, but with a view to moving forward, right? We don't sit there victim-y and blaming and feeling all overwhelmed. We start where you are and we take it from there. The number one emotion I hear from my clients when they say yes to working with me is relief. Relief that they're finally doing something about it. Even though they're still scared. I want you to think about that. They're signing up to work with someone and they have no idea. They have no proof that this is going to work for them. They see all my client testimonials. They understand my podcast. They get where I'm coming from. They feel good about it. We have a connection, but they still have no proof at that point. And yet they feel the relief. And then we start fueling the action we take towards solving the problem rather than sitting there judging ourselves as to why we feel so rubbish. The other angle of relief that comes about, so it's twofold. It's not only is it making a decision and they're backing themselves, it's also relief they can talk with someone, in this case me, who doesn't judge them, who doesn't make them feel ashamed, who doesn't tell them what you need to do is you just need to drink not so much, right? You just need to have more willpower. You just need to be like everyone else. You just need to be good, right? There's relief. Imagine the relief in finding that. So I will end with this. If you are listening to this and you are still thinking, that all sounds so good, but ... Really, I want you to see that while you are special, just for being alive, just for being you, just for all of your you-ness, there is nothing special about your struggle. I have worked with too many people at this point to say anything else. Your struggle is solvable. It's simple. And it's much, much quicker to solve than you might think. So for fear of aging myself here, in the words of Debbie Harry from Blondie, if you do want to stop this, call me or email me, anna@90dayslater.co. I will see you next week. If you like what you're learning in the podcast and you want to take the work further and achieve total freedom around alcohol, let's talk. I help my clients stop reaching for that first glass of wine the moment 6 p.m. rolls around and they don't miss out on life. Email me for more information on anna@90dayslater.co. And if you did enjoy the show, I'd really appreciate if you'd leave a rating and review to help others find the 90 Days Later podcast.